So I guess, Jason, let's start with this. This is the third week back for the PGA Tour. What are your overall thoughts on the way that golf has been received and how it's played out these first few weeks back?
I was skeptical coming into it, Jared. I did not think everything would go as smoothly as they had seemed to think it would. They had planned out. And I remember last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess it is now, watching the Charles Schwab Challenge from Colonial and being at home and just waiting for the butt. Like all weekend, I was just kind of looking for the butt. Okay, it's a good leaderboard, but. And the course is great, but. And okay, there were no positive tests yet, but. And there really wasn't. There was no bump in the road. There was no issue. There was nothing that went wrong. And so it was kind of business as usual after that. I have seen now that we have had a positive test with Nick Watney this past Friday at Harbour Town, I've seen a lot of criticisms for the PGA Tour. And trust me, I would be the first one to criticize if I found reason for criticizing. But quite frankly, isn't that why they have the testing? This is why they don't just do testing on Monday or Tuesday when the players arrive and then have all the people doing the testing take off and go home. And then you're kind of stuck there for the rest of the week without the ability to test anymore. This is why they have those people stick around all week, because Nick Watney was feeling some symptoms, got tested again. He was positive. They were able to test everybody else. Everybody else that had been around him was negative. And you kind of move on from there. That's exactly how this is supposed to work. And so just because a player tested positive, I think a lot of people are trying to poke holes in the strategy of the PGA Tour and the protocols and saying that they're doing something wrong right now. I actually see that as they must be doing something right if they found that one person and they were able to get him tested, get him quarantined, get him staying away from everybody else, and be able to move on from there.
What are your thoughts on the quality of play so far this year? I mean, the leaderboards have been stacked with these top guys. You've seen a handful of other, pretty familiar names up there. Did you think these guys would have been a little rustier coming out of the quarantine break? Or are you surprised with how they've come out of the gate?
I saw some rust at Colonial. I think if we had come back earlier, if we had come back with the PGA Tour 4 or 6 weeks earlier when – quite frankly, players were still kind of getting into practicing a little bit. A lot of them said they hadn't even touched a club at that point. If they had tried to push this a little sooner, I think there would have been more rustiness. But giving guys a little bit more time to kind of work their way back into playing shape, it hasn't been too bad. I thought Colonial was very entertaining. I think that we saw shots from pretty much every world-class player there that at any minute could be great, and at any minute it looks like, ooh, what was that? That's not his usual kind of shot. That's not a putt that he usually misses, but it made for entertaining TV at least. I thought this past week at Harbour Town was much better, and a lot of that can probably be credited to the fact that they're playing on Hilton Head in June and not April, and so it's warmer, it's rainier, so the course is softer, and it's just going to play much easier than it normally does. But I don't know if I'd read that much into that. These guys are really good. These guys are working their way back into the game. I've seen some people on social media say, well, maybe it's because they didn't have the pressure of playing in front of fans, and so they played better. I'm not sure I can quite go there. I don't know that I would credit or blame the fans either way for better scores or worse scores when they're on site. So I just tend to think that it was the course conditions that yielded some really low scoring and a lot of birdies last week. And we'll see what we get this week. Spoke with Nathan Grube, the tournament director from Travelers Championship. I know you've spoken with him too, Jared, and he said that there's a chance if they don't keep watering these greens at TPC River Highlands, there's a chance this course can play fast and firm. And if it does, we might only see something in the 12 to 13 under range win this golf tournament.
Let's start breaking down the field a little bit. And one guy who's been the talk of the tour since it's resumed is Bryson DeChambeau. Just from the way he looks, the way he's swinging the clubs now. What are your thoughts on Bryson coming into this week at Travelers?
First of all, Jared, I love everything he's doing. He is doing things differently, but he is confident. He is invested. We've got a motto at the Action Network, bet on yourself. And I spoke with Bryson a few months ago about the fact that he's basically betting on himself. He is a, 10th, 12th ranked player in the world. And he is basically taking a risk reward. And the risk is, hey, he could fall to 300th in the world. But the potential reward is this can help him move to number one in the world. And he is betting on himself, basically. And I love when any person does that in any walk of life, whatever you do, taking a chance and trying to better yourself. I love that mentality. The fact that he's doing this at this point in his career with his game, with his body, I think it's going to pay huge dividends in the long run. I think he's going to have a monster year in more ways than one. And by the way, he's my pick to win this week. He's finished in the top 10 in each of his last 5 starts on the PGA Tour. He's finished in the top 10 the last 2 years at the Travelers Championship. And so he's got what I like to look at as the intersection of recent form and course history. And if you've got both of those things working in the right direction, then it's going to be tough to not pick you at a specific event. I think Bryson is ripe for a win, and it's just kind of all moving in the right direction after that, because I think he's a guy that can win a first major this year. I think he can go out and have a really big second half of the year. And I would not be surprised, Jared, if at the beginning of 2021, when players kind of go away for a little bit and then come back, we see some of these other top players, if indeed Bryson does play well, who are looking about 20 or 25 pounds heavier and bulked up going into next year just to keep up with him off the tee.
So we've got Bryson as your pick there, but let's talk about some of these other top-tier players playing this week, because Travelers, the past few years, the field's gotten increasingly better, but this year really seemed to click, and you got a lot of the top players. You got Rory, you got Jon Rahm, you got Bryson, Justin Rose, those guys. Yeah. Who else do you like in that top tier of guys that's coming to Travelers this week?
I think it's really difficult. I looked at last week going into the RBC Heritage, and I looked at that top tier from a betting and fantasy and DFS standpoint. I said, I don't really love most of these guys. Rory hadn't played there in a while. Justin Thomas hadn't played in a while. Brooks Koepka, not his really type of golf course, not Dustin Johnson's type. And they just didn't. I didn't really love anyone in that top tier. This week, I look at those guys and I go, yeah, I can absolutely see Rory at some point winning one of these by 6 and just putting everything together. I can absolutely see Justin Thomas, who's got to be kicking himself because he really sort of came up short each of the last 2 weeks. But if he had played a little bit better the first couple of days, could have given himself a chance to win on the weekend. And like I said, just came up short. And he plays really well when he's mad at himself and mad at the way he's played. So I think he's going to put together a good week. Jon Rahm is a guy that on any given week can put it all together. Brooks Koepka absolutely looked like he was trending in the right direction on Sunday afternoon at the RBC. He probably just ran out of holes at the end, but he was making a really nice charge there. So there are a lot of guys up there. Patrick Cantley has played some really special golf. He shot 60, almost holed out on the last hole for a 59 back when he was an amateur, I believe, in 2011. So there are a lot of guys whose games really fit this course well. And like I said, Bryson's at the top of my list from this top tier going into this one, but JT is not far off. Rory is not far off. And quite frankly, there's not one of those guys who would surprise me if they were holding the trophy come Sunday evening.
So you talk about Patrick Cantley there. Another guy who's got a good course history there is Paul Casey, and both of those guys are making their debuts this week. How do you take the layoff into account? When you're trying to pick guys here, are you less likely to pick them, whether it's for betting, fantasy, however you may view it, as a guy that you want to, ride this week based on that layoff?
I think there's a few different factors. I think, first of all, we look at how did guys play at Colonial? How did guys coming back for the first time last week at Harbor Town play? My pick to win last week was Hideki Matsuyama, who skipped the first week back after the restart and was coming in cold. And I said, I don't care. I don't need to see any recent form. This guy's a ball striker. He went out and shot 74-70 and missed the cut. And it was a terrible pick by me. So maybe we take a little wait and see attitude, but I think we go back and look at these guys individually, look at what they've done after long breaks. Patrick Cantley especially is a guy who's had back problems throughout his career. So he's taken some longer breaks than other players and quite frankly tends to play well coming off these long breaks. He's a guy who practices a lot, who really works on his game. So He's a guy that I'm still looking at going into this week. Paul Casey, you're right, has played really well in the past, but there's other guys at his pricing level for both betting and for DFS that I probably like a little bit better than Paul this week, even though Paul's one of my favorite interviews on tour. That guy is awesome.
Another guy that I'm going to throw out there, and I feel like this has been the case now for the past year and a half or so, just not knowing what to do with him, and that's Jordan Spieth. Obviously had the big win here in 2017, but, it seemed like maybe he was coming back at Colonial, still can't, has one of those rounds where he goes out, last week, tripled tripled a hole to start. What are your thoughts on him coming back to Travelers this week? Is he worth taking a shot on?
So I don't know about you, Jared, but I've got enough heartburn and anxiety when it comes to betting and playing fantasy that I don't need to add Jordan Spieth to the mix right now, which is basically what you're going to get. You're going to ride some really high highs, but you're also going to drop down into some really low lows at some point as well. So is he talented enough to go out and win this golf tournament again? Absolutely. I'm bullish on Jordan long term, but I still think a little something is missing right now. That said, I think that the general public is looking at what Jordan is doing right now from a standpoint which is too negative. And I've been saying this for years. I've been preaching this, and I don't know if people are listening or not, but the players themselves take all of these experiences, whether it's, hey, I was close on Sunday and I just barely missed, or whether it's, hey, I was right on the cut line and I wound up making it and got 2 more rounds out of it and played okay. Whatever the case might be, whatever the result is other than a victory, I think the general public looks at that and says, that guy lost, and so it's a negative experience. And I'm telling you, from being around these guys for years, they look at something less than a win as still a positive experience. I mean, I can't tell you how many times guys, hey, they were a 2-shot 54-hole leader and lost by 2 at the end of Sunday, and we're all sitting there asking questions like, are you going to be okay? Like, are you going to, like, you're okay, right? And, like, the guy's like, man, it was just great to be, like, in the hunt and, great to be in the battle and, so glad I had that chance and that opportunity, and I'm going to experience it better the next time I get into contention. And I think people need to understand more that just because Jordan Spieth isn't playing his best golf right now, that doesn't mean he's not getting anything from it. And you could say that about any other golfer out there who hasn't won over the first couple of weeks, basically anybody who's not Daniel Berger or Webb Simpson, that right now those guys have gotten something out of their games just by showing up and just by competing and just by whether it's, a shot here or a putt there, there's something they can take from it and say, hey, I can use that as motivation. I can use that for some momentum and move on to the next week.
Last year at Travelers, a few young guys made their tour debuts there, their professional debuts. You had Victor Hovland, Matthew Wolff, Colin Morikawa, and they've all done really well on the tour since they debuted at Travelers. Is there a guy out of those 3 that you like this week at Travelers?
If you had asked me a year ago which guy I was bullish on long-term the most, it would have been Victor Hovland. I might have been wrong, Jared. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to say I'm definitely wrong, but man, is Colin Morikawa a good player. It's very close still between the 2 of them. That said, I kind of like Victor Hovland this week. I think Hovland has a game that's trending in the right direction, a game that suits TPC River Highlands really well. He shot a nice under par round to start his professional career on this golf course a year ago. And by the way, it's one of the coolest things, and I know it's not really happening this year because of the way college has worked out, the way the guys aren't necessarily turning pro here in the early summer, but over the years with Travelers Championship, I know John Deere does it as well, giving exemptions to young players, and I'm telling you, it pays off. I mean, there are guys from Patrick Cantley to Ricky Fowler to other players who are given exemptions for their first pro start or even as amateurs into the Travelers Championship, and then rewarded Andy Bissett and Nathan Grube and other people with the tournament by coming back year after year after year to reward them for that faith that they had in them as young players. It's just, it's such a, I mean, it's a smart move. It's a savvy move, but it's also just a nice move. I mean, let's, kind of foster these guys' careers and give them a chance to start out on the right foot. I've loved that for a long time. Obviously, that's not really taking place this year because of everything kind of being off schedule, but hopefully that gets back on schedule next year and we get 3 or 4 more young guys who are ready to start their careers at the Travelers Championship.
So last week, Webb Simpson won RBC after missing the cut the week before. Is there a guy who might have missed the cut this past week at RBC that you think could have a chance to make a run this week?
I just taped my podcast in which we were myself and Peter Jennings, my co-host with the Action Network pod, and we're talking about betting plays and DFS plays, and he's very high on Jason Kokrak this week, who I believe missed the cut last week. I don't think he made it to the weekend.
Yeah, I think
a lot of
right.
people are high on him after he contended at Colonial. So he's a guy who he's done the opposite of Bryson, much like Gary Woodland. He's lost weight and he's tried to become more flexible and tried to be in better shape going into the second half of this year. So he's been hitting it really well. Didn't really work for him last week. That course isn't really quite suited for him, but like him a lot more at this course this week.
Is there a name this week that people might be familiar with, a big name out there who you're willing to fade this week?
In my preview column, I've got Jordan Spieth as my big fade. There's not a whole lot of big name guys that I don't like. Bubba might be one of those guys who I'm not quite – it's not that I don't like him here. I just feel like at some point you look at it and say everyone else likes him a little bit more than I do. And so it's not necessarily that I don't like him. It's just that, I kind of like him and everyone else really likes him. And so I guess that means I don't like him as much as anyone else. And so I guess that's a pseudo fade right there.
All right, so we'll go from the fade to the long shot here. Who in that category do you like? Give us a name or two heading into the tournament.
Yeah, there are a bunch of guys. So Dylan Fratelli is a guy that I thought this was going to be like a little sneaky pick. A buddy of mine who's also good friends with Fratelli told me on Friday last week, watch out for Dylan. He loves River Highlands. He missed the cut in his first start there last year, but really likes the golf course. I said, that's going to be great. No one's going to be on Dylan Fratelli next week. And then what did he do? He shot 9 under 62 on Sunday at Harbor Town, and now everybody's going to be on Dylan Fratelli. So that secret is out. Bo Hostler is a guy I spoke with about a month ago. I was filling in for Colt Knost on Graving the Sleeves on SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio, and asked Bo what tournament, if I could only pick him at one event, where should I pick him? And without hesitation, he said Travelers Championship. He finished in a share of second place at this one 2 years ago. Hasn't played great yet this year, but he's got a lot of talent. So I like Bo Hostler. And then a whole group of my guys that I like to hang out with when I'm out on the road. Brendan Steele, Keegan Bradley, Jamie Lovemark, all have varying degrees of success at this golf tournament. Those guys are all probably priced a little bit too low for the market right now.
For sure. And Keegan had a great shot here last year, a New England guy too. So fortunately won't have the fan support this year that he's usually got behind him, but nonetheless, a good pick there. Jason, I'll get you out of here with this one. Golf has kind of had a unique situation here where they've been able to really kind of take over the sports scene here. They're outside of, NASCAR and some of the European soccer. They're really in some of the Asian baseball, they're really one of the only live sports out there. How big of an opportunity is this for golf to be out there and gain some new fans, gain a bigger audience? And do you think they've been successful in doing that so far?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll preface this by saying that up until about 6 weeks ago, Jared, I'd never really sat through a NASCAR race. Just wasn't my thing. Didn't like it. Couldn't bet on it because I didn't know it. And so I just kind of ignored it. And then about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, whenever they came back, I said, oh, well, there hasn't been any sports on for a long time, and I just want to watch something.
Give it a shot.
And if I'm going to watch it, I want to have a little action. So I started betting on it, and next thing I know, I'm yelling at Chase Elliott to take out Danny Hamlin on the last turn coming down the stretch so I can win some money. And so I think that the same thing is happening around the country where there are people who say, Yeah, I like watching the back nine of the Masters on Sunday. And yeah, okay, if Tiger's in contention, I might turn on the TV and watch a little bit, but I'm not really a golf fan. I can't name a lot of these guys. And yet those same people are sitting there right now saying, I've got nothing on TV to watch. I've got to watch some golf. I just need something to bet on. I need some action. And all of a sudden, these people who went from, yeah, I'll watch the Masters a little bit, I know Tiger, to going, come on, Joel Damon, you're killing me. You got to finish top 10. Let's go. What are you doing? And that gets them personally invested, personally engaged in the product. And that's a great thing. I've said for the last couple of weeks that if we had a nondescript journeyman win each of these first two events after the restart by 5 shots, and there wasn't really much drama and it wasn't really much entertainment, we all still collectively would have said, hey, there's golf on TV, gave us something to watch, that was awesome. Instead, what we've got was really good leaderboards, tons of drama down the stretch, really fun tournaments to watch, lots of birdies being made. And so, yes, that's absolutely enhanced the experience, I think, for people, whether they're diehard golf fans or not. And I think that's helped the product moving forward. And I think that we're going to get more golf fans out of this. I think there are going to be people who say, look, I wasn't a big golf fan, but I've kind of been forced into it based on the fact that I've got nothing else to watch. There's no baseball, there's no basketball, there's no anything else going on. And so I've been watching golf, and you know what? I kind of like it, and I'm in. And I think that's really cool, and hopefully that's happening out there.
Awesome, Jason. Really appreciate the time, and everyone out there, make sure you go give Jason a follow and the Action Network a follow. A lot of great content coming out of them, and especially with the golf team here. So, Jason, really appreciate it, and thanks again.
You got it. Thanks, buddy. Enjoy the tournament this week. Should be a great one.
Thanks. You too. Bye.